So I'm going to talk about gender. Big surprise, right? You know, you guys are shocked that the woman on the panel is going to talk about gender. But thank you for having me. I'm very happy to do that. And honestly, I'm going to be a little bit provocative. I hope I'm going to say some things that might make a few of you uncomfortable. And quite honestly, it's going to be purposeful. And I want to do it, quite honestly, in the grand old Carolina tradition of allowing you to go back home and talk about this after you leave. And I say that because I just attended UNC's graduation this weekend, where my son, my last fledgling one, has fledged the nest finally, and it is a great thing. It is a great thing, people. It is a great thing. And it was a long weekend, but we made it. So now we're here at Indiana, and we're going to talk about some issues around gender gap. And so really, I kind of talk about this as like, where'd the girls go? You remember that 1950s movie about where'd the girls go? Well, we're going to talk about what's happening in our environment contextually. And I'm going to talk to you about what happens in medicine overall, and I'll talk to you a little bit specifically about emergency medicine. But I want you to conceptualize right now the fact that you are not just leaders in your discipline, you are leaders in medicine, and that you have a large impact on your institution and your institution's culture, and you should learn how to exert that influence as you move along. We call that leadership, and emergency medicine has a lot of it, and you're very talented, and we're dependent on you to make some of the big changes that we've been unable to make, quite frankly, but that are working toward. So we know that women comprise a substantial portion of all medical school graduates, about 50%, for example, but female physicians enter academic careers actually at about the same rate as men, but yet they move slower along the academic pathway. Women are judged differently for their work, often, frankly, by other women, and they take longer. We know this. This is all data from a JAMA article that's in multiple other publications, but that, you know, it's out there in the literature. They take longer to achieve leadership roles, and that when they get in those leadership roles, they stay in them for shorter periods of time. And the thing that I want to talk about, you know, purposefully, that is the uncomfortable part, are some of the issues around micro-inequities and micro-assaults. So we know that societal expectations for women physicians are really no different than societal expectations for other women, period. Your mother still expects you to have your children well scrubbed, suited up, shoes shined, you know, and, you know, well fed, etc. at every social event that there is. You are expected to have every single thing that every other woman in society is expected to do, and you are also expected to perform professionally. And that's a difficult thing to manage. And we also know that, you know, when you're trying to manage the professional side of your career, you know, a lot of the things that have worked for the guys are not working for the gals. And the types of strategies like mentoring programs and leadership development programs and academic educational programs have all been instituted, but they're not meeting with a lot of success. So, like I said, 50% of U.S. medical students are women. About 34% in the U.S. actually matriculate into medical practice and are the practice cohort, if you will, that are practicing today. And about 68% of all assistant professors in this country are women. But the proportion of women who advance from assistant to associate and associate to full is substantially diminished. In fact, only about a third of women at each tier of those ranks advance to the next rank. So you can see already how big those stair steps are. And this is for tenure and non-tenure track. So when you look at the things, the coin of the realm, if you will, publications, grant awards, etc., women don't have as many, particularly early in their career. And so when you then are measuring those folks for promotion, they are much likely to achieve that. And when you look at leadership, only about 15% across this country of women are departmental chairs, and about 16% are actually medical school deans. In emergency medicine, about 25% or slightly more of our residents are women, but our assistant professors are about 50-50. But when you get to our full professor ranks, there are 3,600 full professors of emergency medicine, 56 of those are women. So when you look at the data from Bickel, which is a little bit old, but it's the best that we have, what you see is that between 1995 and 2000, the numbers of actually full professors in emergency medicine decreased. It went from 11% to 6%. And if you look at 168 training programs today, currently you have 12 female chairs. We tried to count it up the other day, Sue, and I think we got them all, but that's essentially what we came up with. So our pipeline's leaking, and the question's why. And I already, kind of pre-messaged some of this with, the women and their academic and social expectations. We're holding each of those two things equal, and they're very difficult to manage, particularly in the early stages of our career. But women actually anticipate and pre-plan and then subsequently drop out of our workforce much earlier. If you ask women about, most of them will have some consideration for planning a family and having children, and more than 21% express the importance of this over their career. So if you look at the number of women who said, what's more important, your family or career, the majority of women said their family was more important. And the other thing that's really interesting when you look at this is that 51% of men, but 83% of women have a spouse that work outside the home more than 40 hours a week. So, disproportionately women are in dual income families, while men often are in single income or majority single income families, or the wife works part-time. So when you look at that, and then you ask them, hey, if there was a need to make a career change, who would do it? More women than men, disproportionately again said, if my family needed me to make a career change, I'd make a career change. And we know that despite the fact, the American College of Surgeons actually published something recently that demonstrated that if a man and a woman, the woman being the surgeon and the man being a regular 40-hour-a-week employee, and they had a sick child at home, 75% of the time the female surgeon will cancel her cases and stay home with the sick child. So what I'm saying is that we need to make some major changes in our scientific culture in order to accept the needs of both men and women and keep women in the pipeline, particularly in the early years of their career. And women, we need to step up as well. When somebody asks you to take on a leadership role, I'm really always disappointed when someone says, I'm really not ready. And I'm like, I'm asking you because you're ready. You're ready. You're ready. Say yes. And so they are unwilling to take risk. And so, we really do need to think about that. But there is this other concept of unconscious bias that I really want to talk about just for a minute, and because it frequently manifests as microassaults. And this is this kind of, it's a lot about our culture, and emergency medicine has a lot of this culture. We can call it the locker room culture if you want, but it's really, it's our jokes, it's the little insults and kind of little bitty put downs that go on consistently, a lot of it happening in our department. And quite frankly, guys, a lot of it's funny. And I say guys meaning to all people. But what it does is it's a cumulative weight that adds up to the women. And so when I say, you say, well, what are you talking about, Cherry? So here's an example. So you're at a conference, the speaker, you actually know, there's a buddy of yours, it's a male, and he starts his lecture with a series of jokes, some of which are sexual in nature, and you feel a little uncomfortable about that, and you look around the room and everybody's laughing. The women aren't laughing as heartily as the guys, but everybody's laughing because it's actually funny. And it would have been funny to you if you were sitting across the table from someone in a restaurant, but it wasn't funny to you on a podium in a national venue. And it wasn't funny repeatedly, honestly, guys, gals, in that situation. And so, those kinds of things, those things weigh heavily on folks, and we do it in our clinical environment all the time. And the reason we do it is because we're fast thinkers, right? We're funny, we quip, we work in an incredibly difficult clinical situation, and when we do those things, it alienates folks, and it certainly alienates people who are looking at us to join our discipline, particularly the new generation of learners. They are not interested at all in that, and I think the women say, these are not my people, and they step away. And when we're looking at a pipeline that we are not recruiting a 50% majority of women to our residency training programs, we have to ask ourselves why. Because people choose the discipline that they select based on tribe. They don't choose it based on what the science is. They choose it on whether or not they think these are their people, and collectively we should be able to manage many of the work-life issues because we do shift work, so that part we actually have in control. So what is it? And so I'm putting something out there that I think is, again, a little provocative, and frankly I'm doing it because I'm now an old woman, and I can say what I think because I'm an old woman. You know, I should have on my purple suit and my red hat, and that would be perfectly fine. But the point of it is, we need to think about it, and we need to have some real meaningful discussion amongst our leadership about that, because I couldn't have this conversation when I was a young woman. I didn't. And we should be having it now.